question. What does it mean in your mind when you think of the word metacognition?
Do you know what you know, and what you think you know, and true is no.
Okay.
What is it that you think you know it?
Yeah. So I like the how that you just put in there too. The how. How do you know what you know? Right. And how is your thinking?
Because your metacognition may be off, meaning you think you know something, but you really don't know it.
All right, so these are our outcomes for today. To review the 4 essences and identify notebook prompts. So what kinds of things as teachers can we either say or ask the kids to do so that those 4 essences show up in their notebooks? Because that's a great way to see what the kids are thinking. And you can kind of use that notebook as an assessment in a roundabout way. To see what they're thinking. Has their thinking changed since the start of the lesson or the start of the unit? That kind of thing. It's also really good, you guys, to be thinking about your unit and how important that notebook is coming into play throughout your unit. So, for example, maybe at the very beginning of the unit, if you're doing something about matter, because I've been working with you guys on matter. So, even if you just said, so tell me what you know about. A second grader might not know what you mean by the word matter, so put it into their terms. So what do you know about what things are made of, or something like that. And then at the end, going through all your lessons in the units, now what do you know? That kind of thing. So those things do need to be seen in your notebook throughout the lessons and the whole unit. Identify notebook prompts, so we'll be taking a look at that. Record ideas, data, however you want to say it. Personal questions, because maybe they've got questions along the way, things that they still don't understand, or things that they're now wondering. After learning A, B, and C, maybe now they have more questions about D, whatever's out there. You guys have been doing that with some of your gots and needs, right? With your cadre. It's been really cool seeing about some of the questions you guys write at the end of the day after learning something. You could probably attest to that, but now you're kind of wondering, so what's the difference? There was one yesterday. What's the difference between natural selection and evolution or something like that? Really good question, but now you're kind of, thinking about things. So, do you guys remember this from year 1, how people learn?
Yeah.
Okay, so we don't need to read through it, but this is just kind of goes to reiterate or kind of support the idea how important it is to use those 4 essences in your notebooks, right? So key 1 is prior knowledge. So I'm going to give you a chance to read that to yourself. And I'm going to have you do something just really quick. Either have a table discussion or elbow partner discussion about why you think that's so important have that or access that in the classroom with your students. Whenever you're ready, go ahead. So would anyone like to just share out a quick thought or two about
what were some big ahas?
Yeah, about the first one, the prior knowledge. Some big go
just for retention. In order to retain information, you have to be able to link to something that the students know by accessing their prior knowledge, so that way it's going to stay with them. Otherwise, it'll be something they'll memorize maybe for that day or for that month, and then it'll go away.
Like a self-assessment, like a pre-assessment in a way, because it creates dialogue and they come in with different backgrounds, different knowledges. So then, like in our case, we planned for a lesson, and we assumed they would already know the beginning part in order to move on, and they didn't.
That's so true.
So we had to, at that moment, improvise our lesson, and that happens a lot, because it's just diverse. Everybody's prior knowledge is diverse, but it creates dialogue, so that's a good thing.
Lesson's going to go. Maybe what you have planned for that day, you kind of have to take that step back and say, okay, wait, I can't do what I was going to do today. All right, how can I? And even on the spot, all right, how can I kind of do a little bit more to get them going for where I was going to take them today, kind of thing. Excellent point. Oh, okay, one more.
Misinformation, and they take it as truth, and so trying to erase that and reteach, they're always going to revert back from light or whatever it may be, that they get it all confused. So that's the long term of confusion for the kids too.
All right, let's go ahead. Same thing with number 2, because we're just going to do these one at a time just to kind of dissect them a little bit. So if you go ahead and do the same thing, read number 2, the conceptual frameworks, and then just have that quick group or partner discussion about what that means. Conceptual frameworks. I know, just sometimes reading that, you're like, okay, wait, let me read it again. Make sure I really understand what that's saying. So thoughts on number 2?
I was just saying, for me, I know that all 3 of those components are important, but the one that stands out most to me is the one where you understand text and idea in context. Because I feel like when I went to school, we were just more focused on memorizing, here are the facts, these are the facts, not why do we need to know, well, what can we learn from this, how does this apply to other things? And when you have this list of facts, you forget them. Like when I sit in cadre, what I was saying was, I kind of remember learning that in school. I have the memory of learning it, but really being able to pull up all the information, I'm like, I don't use that. I've used it 30 years ago. I'm like, I don't really recall it. Because I think, it really wasn't in a context.
You have to have a deep foundation of like number sense, or just 1 to 20. But then you also have to have that number sense framework. But if you don't understand how numbers work, and then you start to tackle problems that are more complex than just an algorithm style problem, then it'll break down. So if you don't have that framework to support you in like if the retrieval part there, if you're doing a problem and you can't remember how to do the algorithm, for example, then you break down. Whereas if you have a conceptual framework of number sense to support you, you can go, well, you can find a different way to do it, I guess.
And that is really well, so thank you so much. Because Debbie was just telling me about an analogy that Kathy had, that Debbie can explain, but that totally goes along with what Debbie, what Kathy, how she was explaining it.
So what I always think of is the lattice in the garden, right? And that's going to be your conceptual framework. So you're sitting there and you're tying the vines or the roses or whatever up, and if the framework's not there, it falls. So a child that is learning about, say, some ocean critters or something in marine biology or something like that, if they've never seen it, if they have no contextual knowledge of it, then the facts fall by the wayside. So I always picture that lattice frame. Do they have any of the background? The math analogy also, I was pulling up when we were exploring some of the math lessons that are available. They were talking about peanut farming. Well, it had to do with the South, right? But my kids didn't know, wouldn't even dream of how peanuts grow, so that it didn't even relate to them. So, and I like your idea too. It needs to be done in context, and then the learning has meaning. So,
You know the drill. Go ahead and read and then so thoughts about the metacognition part, about how people learn. Yes, ma'am.
So I was giving a good example of how before teachers would just give you your grade and good luck, not really very much feedback. The only time that I remember getting a little bit of feedback was in my writing, because I was an English language learner, so it was more on this might not sound right or whatever, but it wasn't anything specific. So now that we're working with kids, we can actually engage them and say, hey, notice anytime that you're writing words with C, remember that E before I, and oh, that's right, I should do that. Okay, so the next time that you write, so you give them like specifics on what to look for in certain things, or even in their math, whatever it may be, and you give them that 1 or 2 goals, and they thrive, they improve that, and then they move forward, and then you can work on something else. So they're really taking that positive feedback from you and applying it, which is really important for the student, because they're monitoring their progress and they want to succeed. So giving those keys gives them such a big,
Right, and then it ties into, it gives them ownership for their own learning, right?
Mhm.
Anyone else?
I was just relating it to math, like we just adopted our everyday math, and of course the big thing is, have them explain their thinking much more with math, which is hard for them to do. But I was thinking it might make sense with this where, I have them sitting on the carpet, and it's like, well, how did you get this answer? And then they really explain step by step their process and how they got it, and so I write it up and then then I'll ask questions along the way. And then, I mean, does that to me that
Yeah,
pertains
yeah.
to that, because that's their thinking of how to do it. And maybe there was something I could help them with, or another student chimes in and goes, but I did it this way. Okay, explain your thinking, like how did you do it? And then we write it up, and then it really ignites other people, or it makes them think like, oh, I could do it oh, I didn't think that way.
Right.
So it makes them think different ways to do it. So that's
Right.
been a huge thing this year for me, like seeing how their brains are thinking differently with
And
like
again,
the math
taking
strategies.
that ownership of that learning, just because
Yeah.
you and I solved that problem two different ways. I mean, that's the way I thought about it and learned about it, or, you know, and
Yeah.
vice versa. So I think that's really important. One more? Yeah.
I also think about the linking of the knowledge that you've had, so even with the math analogy, but it's sort of the same as science, so, you know, I notice we don't have everyday math, but we have another book, and progressively the word problems get more challenging and integrate more math as they move through. So it starts off kind of, you know, simple 1-2 step, and then gets
Right.
into multi-step. So that same idea, if you're using a conceptual framework and you're helping kids kind of hang their knowledge in a new place, and then, okay, now how does all this stuff link together? And how can you, maybe going back to the phenomenon, right? So how, with all the stuff you learned, how could you explain what's going on here? So it helps them tie things together.
Yeah. So, now that you've read through all three and you've had that discussion, what are your thoughts about the importance of, you know, seeing this in a student notebook? I mean, how would that help you as a teacher? If you have these components somewhere in their notebooks, how would that help you? Linda?
Well, it's transparency. The kids are being accountable, and like in their data tracking. So when it's time for report cards, you don't have to do it all at once. You already have been looking throughout the year consistently at what the kids are doing. At least for us at our school, we do the data notebooks. So the kids know, and it's just, like I said, transparent. There's no surprises. Like the parents know, we do student-led conferences. So it's all everybody being on the same page.
And you can just see the growth. You can see where they started and where they are, and the thinking that went along with it, and the changes in their thinking.
Exactly, where they came in, yeah, and how they've changed along the way.
Well, I teach kindergarten, and clearly the writing is always an issue.
Right.
So it's interesting to me because what I have done the last couple of years is take the time to kind of sit down with them after they've completed whatever little drawing or picture or even a paper that we've done, where it may look all right, and then I have them to tell me about their thinking. What did you learn from this? How that's what I learned, how they know. What they've done on the paper means nothing, because sometimes it can be all right, and then they're saying, and you're going like, writing it down, I'm going like, really? Is that what you want? You know, but it's such an eye-opener where if I had only looked at their paper, I might say, oh, this child totally has this concept down, and they don't. And then when I listen to what they think they know or what they've learned, it helps me with what we're doing.
It's totally an
But,
eye-opener.
You know, there's the time to sit down and journal what each one of those kids is thinking.
Right, and I mean, I think, and that's a really good point. I mean, there are ways to do it, whether they can write in a notebook or not. I mean, what you did, even for the EL students, you know, and if you're trying to get them to write in English, or some of my RSP kids who have a hard time, you know, writing down, you know, any of this. But so getting other ways to get that information from them, it does. It helps you to reflect as a teacher to know, okay, did I do what I wanted to do? Did I reach my goal? But also to think, to be an I can't say this the right way. Have it be an eye opener for us as teachers to see what the kids are thinking, and has their thinking changed, and is it where I wanted it to be? So before, we already talked about this, the essence of thinking, prior knowledge, gathering data, making sense of data, and metacognition, right? So any thoughts or questions about any of those? Because through some of the discussion, I heard some things about prior knowledge, like some things, questions, what that looks like in the notebook, or how you get that from students? No?
Because I don't really know that we have that written in our notebook, and of course, we're kindergarten, so, if you have that kind of thing as an oral discussion, are we covering that? Do we need to go back and put something in there?
Okay, Okay, so you have that, but it still needs to be, it's kind of like a map or the pathway of their learning, so having some kind of recorded way to do that, whether it's, you know, just verbally doing it in an iPad or something, or you, like you doing, I know that's way easier said than done with 20-something little kids, and you're writing down everybody's thoughts. So if you can figure out a way to do that, to get that sampling, that's key. So yeah, because the 4 essences are expected to be in your lessons. Does anybody have a suggestion for her besides just tape recording it? Or jotting it down? I mean, that's tough. No? Okay, well maybe we can think of some other ways along the way. All right, so what we're about to do is we're going to give you an actual sample of a student notebook. And just before, because I know once we start passing off, you're going to start looking at them, but things that we want you to notice about the entry. So, so feel free to write on this as you read through it, and you can have a discussion at your table break too if you want. But what essences do you see here in the notebook? So feel free to go ahead and label them when you see them if you'd like, and see if there's anything missing. And at the end, think about what other prompts you might use to show all the essences. If you can see a prompt in here, you might even want to circle it or underline it or something, identify it in some way so that you're like, oh, this is a prompt for metacognition or whatever it is. Okay? Any questions? No? Okay. So how many of you found that there, that it looked like prior knowledge was missing? How many of you would agree with that?
It looked like it had.
A few hands?
Prediction kind of is prior knowledge, because my prediction is based on what I knew.
Okay, so this is really a really good point, and this is why I think some people are like, I don't know if this is really considered, prior knowledge or not. Do you think it will stick or not, right? The prediction part. Okay, so that's a little that fine line or kind of that gray area. You're not really sure. So how could we make that better? I mean, it's really not clear about whether or not we're accessing their prior knowledge. It's not super clear. So how could we make that clear? Yeah.
We were also talking about the different formats, the different template types. If we didn't know if it was 3 different samples or if it was progressional, like in one step you have the questions kind of like a KWL, but then was it taught to be written that way? I used to think, now I think, and so on, or is it something that is just 3 different templates or 3 different styles of note taking?
So from what I understood, this is one person's notebook. And I know
Okay.
that the writing looks different on some of
Oh,
the
that's
pages.
why.
Yeah, so
I
is it a
know.
rewrite?
I know. So
Is it a reflection? Or
I'm
is it then take it and template it into a format?
Right.
That teacher wants?
So I hear what you're asking, but right now I
Well,
want to
that's
just.
just what we were observing.
Yeah. But I want to get back to that prior knowledge question. So because it's a little iffy, a little not the gray area, right, about whether a prediction is actually accessing their prior knowledge. So if you as a teacher were going to try to make this clearer in their notebook, what do you think could have been done to make this a little bit either more obvious or better to access the student's prior knowledge?
I probably would have given them a journaling question where I just said, what do you think will happen? And let them write, just let them write about it for a little bit, what they thought would happen and why that might happen.
Okay, so it gets back to that prompt,
It's
right?
very open-ended prompt that said, what are your thoughts on what will happen when we do this activity?
Or even what do you know about magnets, right?
Yeah.
I mean, something that basic. So I
Right.
thought I saw another hand over here. Yeah, Jen?
Well, when we were going to the last page, we were saying, that we didn't think it would be very effective as prior, for them to just say what they used to think after they had already learned something new or more about it. So then we were saying, well, maybe this is a prompt, and the piece that's missing from here is the journal, and they used the journal to summarize, I used to think, now I think, based on, this would be like their exit ticket. And then it would be sort of okay. It's very vague though, what they used to think. They didn't go into very much detail, but we were kind of trying to get some information and figure that out, so.
Yeah.
No,
So I'm
it's
trying to
okay.
say,
So
like,
do you
it was
think-
progressional, meaning.
Right,
it's
right.
like Recap.
So this is the whole, this from what I understand, this is the whole journal part for this little lesson.
Okay.
So the so the part that you're talking about, yeah, the prior knowledge is missing, because then what I used to think, that's not clear, because there was no true, right, accessing that prior knowledge, okay?
Yeah.
So, okay, so prior knowledge is missing. And missing from the article, yeah. And something you guys, from what I'm hearing, something you would have done better, or to improve accessing the prior knowledge, was to have them do some kind of short write in their notebook. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, we
Okay.
do that in our quadrants, like say Monday or Sunday. What do you know about salt marsh? So we're talking about that, and then we go visit and know a little bit more. Now we can refine our so you can see the show, especially for students, you can see their growth. They can see it themselves.
Right, exactly. I'm getting back to the, so where?
They didn't finish that section.
Yeah, actual, they didn't put in.
But is there something there? I mean, yes, it's, or it's kind of not clear too, isn't it? Like, it says prediction, yes, no, or whatever.
It has that, and then it has two columns where they were going to do the actual and yes and no, but they didn't. But then they did write some observations, like the magnet attracted the black rock, and you put the hopper around the nail thing.
Okay, so the observations, the actual little chart that they made, right, little table? Uh-huh. Was there gathering data anywhere else? Did you notice it anywhere else in there? No, just the front page? Okay. All right, how about making sense of data? Where did you see that in the notebook entry?
On the
Second page?
Second page at the bottom.
Okay, is there anything that would really kind of like jumped out at you that, oh my gosh, this is pretty clear?
So there's claim and evidence. They made a claim and then they backed it up with their evidence.
Right.
Why I thought this, not just.
And that's just such a simple one for us to do with our kids and their notebooks.
What grade was this, do you know?
You know what, I don't know.
It sounds like fifth with the content.
That's what it looks like to me, is probably fifth, but. Okay, and how about the metacognition piece? Where did you see that? And is it more than one place? Did you see it? So, all right, so I'm hearing at the very end. Was there anywhere else you saw it? Go ahead.
We had a discussion, or just a question, the question underneath the data on the first page, we didn't know if that was a question from the student or a question from the teacher.
Okay.
So like, were they making questions?
So this is the one down here at the bottom that you're looking at on page 2, where it says some metals attract magnets and some don't. Why?
Yeah.
Page 1.
On page 1, yeah.
Yeah.
Talking about not
Okay.
understanding the prediction piece, yes and no, what is it yes and no to?
It would have helped if some of this was finished a little bit more to make it a little bit clearer.
So,
Oh, go ahead.
so I would think if the student was making a question, then they're thinking about their thinking.
Right.
But if not, then.
Then it's just the teacher's prompt that they never got to answering.
Right, yeah. I'll put it, if it's a student question, that would be perfect, right? So we'll assume that.
So really quick, the wording at the end for the metacognition part that you guys identified, what wording in there kind of like popped out at you that made you think, oh yeah, this is the metacognition. They're showing you what they now know.
I used to think, now I think, I wonder.
And that's something simple to do with those sentence frames, right? If you look around the room, there are 4 different posters. Prior knowledge in the back, collecting data, making sense of data, and the metacognition piece. So we're gonna divide you up into groups, and what we would like you to do, markers at each paper, what we'd like you to do is see if you can each, or at least one per group, come up with a prompt that you could use, because in the end, you guys are gonna be able to take pictures of these prompts to get your students answering those prompts in their student notebooks to show these 4 essences in their notebooks, or however you do it, okay? But that's really helpful for us thinking, okay, so what could I say or ask my students so that I am getting these 4 essences during science or in their notebook, excuse me. Any questions?
What is this related toward, like what questions are we relating it to? Like specifically?
To the 4 essences.
But I mean specifically to our unit or specifically?
No, just to accessing
Just-
prior knowledge
okay.
in general. So what could you say?
Oh,
Like,
okay.
you know, we were saying, what would you say to this kid to access their prior knowledge about a magnet? You know, there are a couple different ways.
So toward this?
No, just in general,
Okay.
in general.
Okay,
So I
sorry.
wonder, blank, 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 dot, 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 whatever,
Okay,
yeah.
got it.
So the thing is you're gonna be moving to all the posters, so, but we're gonna start you off all on one particular, and then we're gonna move, and we're gonna keep doing it until we have several prompts up there, and then, the other group, what they did is they took pictures of it, and that way you got a record of it. Some things that you can use in your own classroom, okay? All right, so I'm gonna ask these 2 groups, this group to start here at Making Sense Data. You 2 ladies in the back, if you would just start right there at prior knowledge, and then you guys started collecting data. Metacognition, and you 3 why don't you doing prior knowledge. Okay? Thanks, and we'll bring you a marker.
Unless they've done their journaling.
Another prompt that's in your head, and you just have to get it out on paper no matter which one it is. Feel free to go and add it. Otherwise, feel free to get your device and go ahead and take a picture of all the prompts that you can now use in your own classroom, your own notebooks.